and read what I wrote. And actually, people try to get me not to run. They come and try to be my roommate and steal my purse and try to get me certified crazy. They come up to me. My relative tries to get me to not run. I've had all kinds of people try to cause me not to run through my life. And I've tried to run several times. So here's part of my story. I can't imagine anyone that is running for U.S. Senate that has any more of a passion for justice than I do. Because of having a V on my forehead as a baby, people came from miles around to see me and called me the Victory Baby. This was World War II, and I guess they were looking for some kind of a symbol that the war might soon be over. I got some notoriety, and some people evidently thought I might run for a high office. And so they started the people that lust for power and money started trying to cause me trouble. At least that's the way I see it. When my former husband was divorcing me, they told me at Luke Air Force Base I needed an operation that I didn't need. And as a result, I put this thing in my head that has taken away the privacy of my own thoughts. I became a target of people who gassed me in my car, where I rent cheaper rooms because I can't afford my own housing, to buy something. They break my cars, they mess around with my electronic equipment like my watch, my computer, you name it. When Clinton got in power, they started transmitting in vulgar words and goading me and popping words on my mouth like the N-word. And they sleep deprived me. That's why I look so crappy. I have filed about 20 federal lawsuits against the government, those guilty, and I get corrupt judges who don't give a crap about justice, and they dismiss my case without even talking to me. I went around to about 535 legislators 3 different times in D.C., and nobody would talk to me there. I have called many of the offices, and I just know that I have fought for justice, for trying to stop wars and trying to help get justices impeached and this kind of thing. And so if you want a justice fighter, you'll try to help me get on the ballot. But if you want somebody that's catering to the billionaire class, who has voted nearly half the time with Republicans, then you would, who has tried to help deregulate the banks, has voted for a balanced budget amendment that would destroy every social program, including Medicare and Medicaid, and who has sponsored H.R. 20, which the advocates indicate will help weaken the American for Disabilities Act. And she's also taken money from people who made money off of child pornography and sex trafficking. She's also taken a lot from the big banks like Citibank and J.P. Morgan. So if you want her and the status quo like we've got in Congress right now, you'll send her or you'll work for me, who will really fight for justice for myself and for all of you.
Why you got into it, but somebody had a question, so maybe if you could answer this very quickly, and I bet it might be other people in the room have a question too. What does the clerk of the Supreme Court do? Superior Court, sorry.
Yeah, don't put me in the Supreme Court just yet. The clerk of Superior Court, we have several rules of court mandates that we follow, but basically, in a nutshell, plain words, we are Grand Central Station for anything that's going to go before a Superior Court judge. So we are the front office when you first enter the courthouse that you would file your documents with. Anything that's going to go to the court for consideration is first filed with me. This is partially why I run independently to the judges. I do not work directly for the judges, we work together. I am a complete separate body so that I keep that neutrality. So anything that's incoming, we process, we route to the judge for consideration. The judge gets to make those difficult decisions, and once they've rendered their orders, those documents flow back through my office. So it's critical that we are organized, that we are on top of things, we are ensuring that the wills of justice are ongoing. If one thing slips through the cracks, that means it's impacting somebody's life out in the community. So one thing that I really try to instill in my staff as they grow within my office is It's not a piece of paper that you're pushing, although it's a ton of paper we're pushing and a lot of data that we are entering. It's what is behind that. For example, if the court orders something perhaps remanded and the court clerk that processed that order didn't take the steps to remand that case to another court, then it just sits on the shelf and nothing is happening. So again, that's just a very small example. Some of the fun things that we do are passports. If you're going on a trip, that's fun times for us. People coming in, they're excited about that. And we also issue marriage licenses. So the staff has to be able to switch gears quickly. I mean, I can go on and on for days, but that's just in a nutshell what we do.
Thank you. All right, we're going to switch gears here a little bit to some policy questions. And we're going to pick a big one, since I'm sure you guys are brave enough to do it. And we're going to ask a question about guns. And this question goes to Kelly, January, and Kathy. All right, so what is your response to Governor Ducey's gun safety bill? And what will you do to address gun violence in Arizona, particularly in our schools?
This is a great question, and you know, I look forward to being on a debate stage with Doug Ducey. And having him tell me, a mom, that my kid's teacher should be armed. So I was actually the first candidate in this race to come out with a pretty robust gun policy. And when I went to write it, it's on my website. You can go look at it, FryerForArizona.com. The place I went first was to the Giffords Foundation website. And I basically took the recommendations that the Giffords Foundation is making for gun laws in Arizona and built my policy around those recommendations. I grew up in a city. I grew up in a city, and I can remember one Christmas sitting with my family in our living room, and we had a great big picture window, and we had Christmas lights strung around them, and a bullet ricocheted through the picture window and bounced around our living room and just missed my little brother, who was about a year old at the time. I grew up with being afraid of guns in an urban environment. I'm not a hunter. I've never shot a gun, but I have a lot of respect for folks who do hunt. And I got to tell you, as my daughter and I are driving around in a lot of these rural roads around Arizona, and we see animals, I think to myself, maybe I should learn how to shoot a gun. But when it comes to gun safety for our kids, in our schools, in our urban areas, in our communities, guns have no place in those kinds of settings.
I agree with Kelly that it is terrifying to me as a teacher to the idea of arming our teachers with guns. I personally do not want to carry a gun. I do not want my coworkers carrying a gun. It is absolutely terrifying to add more guns to any kind of situation. That said, I want to focus a little bit more on solutions. As you may have heard in the news, the current ratio of counselor to student ratio in Arizona is 924 students to every counselor, when the national recommendation is 250. We have by far the highest ratio of any state in the country, by far. It's almost double, I think. And that needs to change right there. And so this does go back to the teacher pay issue, that in Arizona we have one of the lowest teacher pays in the country. And if we adequately pay our teachers, if we adequately hire enough counselors, social workers, school psychologists, all the support staff that goes into the school setting to make sure that the mental health needs of our students are addressed in the school setting, that would solve a lot of problems. And so I know that in the governor's proposal, he talked about additional funding for mental health services outside of the school setting, but really the school setting is the first environment in which we can identify kids that are dealing with these types of mental health issues, or that are having different challenges outside of the school environment. And if we had smaller classroom sizes, then the teacher could provide more support to these students and have more of an awareness as well. So I think it's a broad problem. But one other thing I will add that I think separates me from other candidates is that I believe that we should be encouraging having more meditation and those types of social skills curriculum in the schools rather than using more punitive measures in detention.
I think, imagine Arizona if we had just one statewide officer who was willing to have a rational approach to preventing gun violence. That is my commitment as our next Attorney General. When I did grow up in a home with lots of hunters in our home. My dad has more than one gun. Target practice. I mean, that's not unusual or different to me. None of the people that I know in my personal life who have guns and use guns for different reasons have any problems with the rational solutions that are being brought forward to prevent gun violence. And that's the space we need to be in. When we lost 17 lives in Parkland, I know for many of us there was something different about it, and I don't know why, but it was that this is enough. I reached out to Mark Kelly, who's Gabby Gifford's husband, and said, I really need to sit down with your staff. I really need to understand what are the solutions that are very aggressive, but what are the solutions that a reasonable leader of this state, someone who has a commitment to the public safety of people just like I do, what are the solutions that they shouldn't be able to ignore? And they exist, but they're still being ignored here in Arizona. So that is my commitment to you moving forward, is to continue to keep solutions on the table that we gather with law enforcement, with our community leaders, and certainly with these young people who have given us more hope than anything else, I think, in the last year.
Thank you so much. So we're going to be voting on the governor's plan in committee on Monday, and it'll probably go to the floor on Tuesday. And I think the biggest gap in the plan is anything remotely touching on universal background checks. And that is probably the most effective policy that we could entertain that would keep guns out of the hands of people that shouldn't have them. It's something that we've talked to the governor about from day one when he invited us to offer our thoughts, that this is really important and it's not even on the table, nothing close to universal background checks. In Kansas, when they did away with them, gun violence went up. In Connecticut, when they implemented them, gun violence went down. There's direct evidence that universal background checks are effective in reducing gun violence, and it's not even on the table. And that's a tragedy, because this is an opportunity to take real, meaningful, effective action. So the governor's plan has some nice things in it that will help address some issues at schools. They're not going to address issues in the community. We know that these shootings aren't just happening at schools, they're happening in movie theaters and churches and concerts and everywhere that we go in public. And universal background checks is the most effective thing we could do, and it's not even on the table. And Kelly mentioned Giffords, and so did Kathy, and we all mentioned Giffords. They rank Arizona 47th in terms of policy, and they have 6 sort of policy umbrellas. And Arizona is like a half of a circle on one of those policy areas. We're in F. We could do so much more, and this plan falls very far short of that. So we're going to continue to work to try to bring about more meaningful policy change, and hopefully that will happen. But I think if it doesn't, we have one more reason to elect new leadership in our state.
So as you know, you can tell by everybody out here, we're a pretty active community, active in this city and active in this county. How can we best protect local initiatives at either the city or county level that the state government has worked to either try to suppress or to try to roll back? And I'll give it to Felicia first.
I
I just think it's funny that the state is trying to get suppressing local issues when they're the very ones who complain when the federal government infringes on states' rights. So now they're doing the same thing, and I've seen that firsthand with in the House when I was an activist there with Sierra Club. They're trying to complain about the federal government infringing on public lands, and they want the states to have the public lands, and so they went on and on about that. I won't mention his name, but he's the one I'm running against. But, so I just pointed that out to him that, hey, you're complaining that the federal government's stepping on your rights. Now you're trying to ban the ban on plastic bags because the Bisbee wants to ban their plastic bags on there. So why are you doing that? But those I'm totally against. I mean, local, you know best. I mean, LD6 covers a lot of territory. The state covers. We have a very diverse people, terrain, personalities, everything here in Arizona, and what works for one place doesn't necessarily work in another, and you know best what works for you. And if a city wants to do the buyback of weapons, then let them do that. It benefits everyone. If it works well in that city, you test and see, oh, maybe it will work in the next city. So let the cities do that, and then you can see it spread, and hopefully it spreads to the entire state. So and that's a better way to do it, I guess, than doing it by state. It's one positive aspect of doing it just locally. But I'm a huge proponent for letting people decide what's best for them. And it's local, and it's local.
In my 8 years in the legislature, I've seen more than a handful of folks jump from county or city government to the legislature, and one of their biggest issues when they get there is helping to maintain local control. And every single one of them gets bitten by this bug, whatever it is, that makes them decide that the state government knows better, and these issues really aren't local issues, they're issues of statewide concern, and we have to regulate them. And so, I mean, I think that the best thing that we can do to change that is elect different people to the legislature that are going to respect local control. 2 years ago, we passed, and I say we as the collective, I voted no, but I'm proud of being a champion of cities and towns from the league for the last few years. So that means I respect local control. So we passed the most egregious, archaic preemption of local control that I think anywhere in the United States have ever seen. And it allows a legislator, if they believe a city, and Flagstaff, Bisbee, Tempe, Phoenix that are passing progressive policies, make no mistake, these are the cities that are the targets of these kind of laws. Because you guys are taking government into your own hands and doing the things the legislature won't do to recognize civil unions and same-sex marriage and non-discrimination of LGBT folks and banning plastic bags because it's the best thing for your community to do. And now a legislator can take any of those laws and say, we think this is violating state law, force the Attorney General to investigate. And if you continue to try to uphold that ordinance, the state will take away your state shared revenues. And that is horrible. And legislators that don't even represent your district can make a complaint about your city. And that's what happened in Bisbee to overturn their plastic bag ban. It's ridiculous. And the only way we're going to change this is electing a new legislature.
Role is square in the middle of that issue because the legislation that Katie just referred to, it leaves it with, the tattletale. If someone passed something that's too progressive, Attorney General, can you tell us that they're not allowed to do it? That now responsibility lies in that legislation with the AG. And I can't tell you how different our philosophies are on this issue. And right now, Patagonia, they reached out because their city council tried to pass a law that protects the roads in town because some of the mining, the big heavy trucks are causing damage to the roads, and they want to pass a law to determine which roads can be used by heavy trucks right away, just like that. And this again has to do with donors. This again has to do with donors going to legislators to stop whatever policy it is that's trying to be put into place at the city level. So it is an opportunity. I agree
With everyone said, local communities, they know best what is for their local communities, and if it's wrong, their people will vote them out.
So I'm going to take a little bit different view on this issue. And let me just tell you, I work in Tucson, I have a home in Tucson, where we've tried to buy back guns and been stopped from that. My residence is in Bisbee with, the attempt to ban plastic bags. But here's the real problem. Cities like ours are having to take things into our own hands because we have a state government that is not listening to the people of Arizona and isn't operating out of the values that we all share. And it worries me a little bit to go all the way down the road of local control, because what happens when we have cities that want to ban housing for LGBTQ people? Because they think they know what's best, right? If it wasn't for the Civil Rights Act, which was a federal act that affected all of our states, I just think we have to be really careful here and focus on the real problem, which is that we have a completely distorted set of values in the governor's office and in our state legislature. What we need, I think, is leadership in this state that can help us tap into the values that we all share as human beings, as residents of this beautiful state, as Americans, and put those values at the heart of everything we do. Every policy we write, every law we pass, every budget we draft. Those values need to be at the core. Wouldn't it be great if instead of having cities fight cities and cities fight the state, if we were all working together to make Arizona work for everyone? That's what I want to do as the governor.
Wrap it up.
Yeah, I definitely have something to say about this. I jumped up and made my way this way. I just want to point out to everybody here in the room that right now we have a state representative who is threatening us with action simply because council is thinking about a resolution. I want to make sure we understand that. I'm just going to put him on blast. This is Bob Thorpe. Thinking. We are going to be discussing on Tuesday about a resolution that we may or may not move forward. A resolution is a statement from the Flagstaff City Council that is non-binding, has no authority, but just puts out what we think about something that may be happening. Now, he has been missing and on the side of a milk carton for months. Somehow he managed to call our city attorney and tell our city attorney that he's going to move forward with action because we're thinking about this. This is a problem. Period. It's a problem. Yes. And it's out of the hands of the local government to even put out a statement on what we're thinking because we may or may not be able, to keep our state shared revenues. I just want to make sure we all understand that. It impacts how we govern, and it impacts our charter, which says that we are allowed to make statements against things that we think should not be happening. This is a problem. We need some more people down there that understand what local control means.
I think our time is up. Before we end, can everybody give Shauna a round of applause? Today. Do you have anything final to say? Well, thank you everyone for coming. I'm sure if you stick around, I'll speak for everybody up here. I'm sure they'd be happy to talk to you some more and answer questions that we couldn't get to. But thanks for everybody for participating.